There was still steam coming off her plate when she said it. I'm done with this marriage. Not in a shout. Not in some messy, mascara-streaked breakdown. Just a fork gently clinking against ceramic, the scent of garlic still warm between us, and then that. I remember staring at the lasagna I had spent 2 hours making, homemade noodles, real ricotta, fresh basil I grew myself, and a chipped ceramic pot on the windowsill. Her favorite. Or it used to be. She didn't touch it. Not a single bite. I didn't ask, why, because I already knew. You don't plan your exit during dinner unless you've already packed your appetite somewhere else. My response? I looked her straight in the eye and said, then so am I. I'm free. It came out too calmly. I wish I could say I meant it in a strong, noble way. But it felt more like surrender. Like the quiet voice you use when you're too exhausted to keep swimming. She blinked once. Maybe she expected a fight. Maybe she'd already rehearsed one. But I gave her nothing. She stood up, walked into the hall, grabbed her overnight bag. Yes, overnight bag. Because this wasn't a spontaneous unraveling. This was a scheduled exit, and left the house. The front door didn't slam. It closed like a whisper. Like it felt sorry for me. I sat there for a long time. The cheese hardened. The wine I poured for her sat untouched, just close enough to my hand to make me feel pathetic. The only sound was the kitchen clock ticking over my shoulder like it had somewhere better to be. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I slid her full plate into the fridge. Not because I thought she'd come back for it, but because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. The house grew quiet in the days that followed. Not peacefully quiet, more like the kind of silence that settles in funeral homes. Her toothbrush vanished. Half the closet emptied. The bathroom smelled like generic soap again. Her jasmine shampoo scent didn't even linger on the pillow. I kept walking past empty spaces like they owed me an explanation. But none of it hit me like what happened 30 days later. Because that's when she came back, without warning, without knocking, just walked in like the house was paused in her absence. And froze the moment she saw what had taken her place. She stood in the doorway, eyes flickering between the hallway coat hook and the stranger sitting on the floor of our living room, casually folding laundry that wasn't hers. Her name was nowhere in the house anymore. Not on the bills, not on the packages, not even in the Wi-Fi label I renamed out of spite. Still, the moment she walked in, it was like time bent around her as if she still had the right to be here. I didn't say a word. Neither did the woman folding the towels, June. That's not her real name. And honestly, she doesn't even feel like a replacement. She was just there. A friend who once cried beside me at the dog park over a lost golden retriever. Someone who knew how to sit in silence without trying to fix anything. She didn't move in. She didn't bring drama. She just started showing up, like warmth creeping back into a room I didn't know had gone cold. And now here we were, with the woman who broke me standing slack-jawed near the front door, key still dangling from her fingers, the ex-wife title clearly still not fitting right in her mind. Who is she? She asked finally, voice laced with disbelief, maybe even jealousy, which was hilarious considering she was the one who detonated our life and walked away without so much as a tear. I didn't answer her. Not right away. I stood up slowly, brushing my hands on my jeans, watching her scan the room. Her eyes landed on the plant she once called ugly, now thriving in the kitchen corner. The rug she hated, still here. The old mug she always wanted me to throw out, sitting proudly on the coffee table. My rebellion wasn't loud. It was curated in silence. She stepped forward, as if testing the floor beneath her feet, like it might collapse without her. But it didn't. The house was still here. I was still here. Just not hers anymore. You left, I said quietly. Remember? Her jaw clenched. I thought you'd be alone. There it was. The truth. Not that she wanted me, but that she expected me to stay broken. Alone. Waiting. Like some sad relic tucked in a box labeled, what used to be. Well, I said, glancing at June, who didn't stop folding. You thought wrong. June looked up finally, met my ex-wife's gaze, and with the kindest expression possible said, do you want to stay for dinner? There's enough for 3, if you're okay eating with strangers. That cracked something in her. She blinked, shook her head slightly like she was trying to wake up from a dream she hadn't agreed to. I didn't come to socialize, she said. I came because I thought maybe we could talk. Now, I asked, stepping past her toward the kitchen to turn off the oven timer. You want to talk now? A month ago you walked out mid-dinner and told me you were done. Didn't even bother to lie about where you were going. She didn't deny it. Instead, she looked toward the couch. Her spot was taken, literally. June had claimed it days ago, completely unaware of the ghost that seat apparently belonged to. And yet, it fit her better. I knew then that something had shifted, not just in the room, but inside her. She wasn't used to losing the upper hand. She wasn't prepared for the version of me that didn't grovel, didn't beg, didn't even offer her the chair. Things didn't work out the way I thought, she muttered, lowering her gaze. You mean with him? I asked, sharper than I meant to be. But she flinched, so I didn't apologize. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. I wanted to feel triumphant. I wanted to stand taller and laugh and say, Karma's a witch, isn't she? But I didn't. Because in truth, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. Like I'd already finished grieving something she was just now beginning to realize she'd lost. That's when she asked, can I come back? And the silence after that question was louder than any argument we ever had. You won't believe what happened next. Her words sat between us like smoke. Can I come back? She asked, and for a second, I swear the walls leaned in to hear my answer. June stopped folding. My own breath caught, like my lungs weren't sure what protocol to follow. This woman, who had shattered me with casual words over cooling lasagna, now stood in my living room like she'd forgotten which door she burned on her way out. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was thinking it over, but because I was stunned by how easy she made it sound. Like this was a game of musical chairs and she expected her seat to still be empty. As if my pain had just been a brief inconvenience for her to work through whatever phase she thought she deserved. June looked at me, not possessive, not jealous, just waiting. She knew this wasn't her fight. She also knew she had a front row seat to a collapse that had already happened. I turned back to Darlene and I asked one question. Just one. Why now? She didn't like that. Her face twitched, lips tightened. Her hand twirled the keys she still held, as if spinning them would conjure a better answer. I thought things would be different. With him. You mean the guy you left for? I said, sharper than I wanted, but not half as sharp as the edge she once used to slice through our vows. The one you told was your real future, while you packed an overnight bag right under my nose? She looked away. Her gaze fell on the framed photo still hanging above the fireplace, the last one we ever took together. I had meant to take it down weeks ago, but something kept me from doing it. Not nostalgia. Not love. Maybe just inertia. Or maybe I wanted her to see it one last time. The version of her who looked happy next to me. The version of me who didn't know yet. I made a mistake, she whispered. God. Those 4 words. That's all? A mistake? Like she picked the wrong wine or took the wrong exit. Like you don't leave your husband, destroy his trust, vanish into someone else's bed and life, and come back calling it a mistake. I scoffed. It was involuntary. That's convenient. She stepped closer, and I stepped back. It wasn't dramatic, just instinct. My body remembered pain even if my voice tried to stay calm. I didn't come here to cause trouble, she said. I didn't expect to see someone else. I didn't say anything to that. I didn't have to. June stood up then. Quietly. She folded the last towel and placed it in the basket, then carried it down the hallway without a single glance back. She wasn't walking out, she was stepping aside. That's who she was. Not a homewrecker. Not a rebound. Just someone who knew when space mattered more than presence. Darlene watched her disappear around the corner, then turned back to me. Who is she? I shrugged. Someone who didn't run. That stung her. I saw it. A flash of anger that she tried to hide behind a nod, like she was pretending to understand something she didn't. I know you hate me, she said, voice tight. I shook my head. No, Darlene. If I hated you, this would be easier. You're just someone I used to love more than myself. That's harder. The room fell quiet again. She stepped forward once more, her voice softer now. Ren, I don't want to be alone. I laughed. It was a sad, tired laugh that I couldn't stop. You weren't alone. You just didn't want to be with me. I thought she'd get defensive. Instead, she sat down, on the edge of the couch, not in her old spot, as if even she felt it wasn't hers anymore. I thought you'd wait, she whispered. That maybe you'd understand. I tilted my head, genuinely baffled. Understand what? That you needed to sleep with someone else to realize you missed stability? That I was your emotional backup generator? She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Don't. Please. Just don't cheapen it with explanations. Not tonight. The oven timer went off again. I had forgotten to turn it off earlier. The beep echoed across the quiet space like a cruel joke. You want to eat? I asked, bitterly. There's lasagna in the fridge. The one you walked away from. She didn't answer. But she stayed. And that was the most dangerous thing she could have done. You won't believe what she asked me the next morning. I barely slept that night. Even after she went upstairs to the guest room, Thank God, not our old bedroom. I lay there in the dark, my mind racing like it hadn't in weeks. I could hear the faint creak of her footsteps above me, the quiet shut of the bathroom door, the slow opening of dresser drawers she had once filled and emptied in one brutal weekend. She had brought nothing with her but a canvas tote and a tired apology. June didn't come back into the living room. She knew the storm wasn't over yet, only changing shape. She slept on the floor of my office, curled under a throw blanket like some temporary visitor in her own life. I hated that. I hated that she felt like the intruder when she was the only honest presence left in this house. Around 5 a.m., I finally sat up on the couch, my neck stiff, mouth dry, heart still thrumming like I was bracing for impact. I padded toward the kitchen in socks, stepping over the cold patch where Darlene's suitcase had once sat like a silent threat. She was already there, at the table, hair pulled back, wearing one of my old hoodies, the gray one with the fraying cuffs. The one she once said made me look harmless. She didn't look at me when I walked in, just stared down at her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't even sipped from. I was going to leave early, she murmured, before anyone else got up. I nodded. Then why didn't you? She looked up. Her eyes weren't red from crying. That almost made it worse. I don't know, she said. Maybe I wanted to see if you'd say anything, or tell me to go. I poured myself coffee. No sugar, no cream, just bitter heat to mask the taste of everything I didn't say out loud. I didn't sleep, she added. Neither did I. She tapped her fingers against the ceramic, then asked it, the thing I hadn't expected, not ever. Would you consider trying again? I blinked. What? She repeated it, slower, like it was a reasonable offer and not a detonator. Would you consider letting me back in? I let out a breath through my nose. Not a laugh, not a sigh, just pressure being released before I exploded. Back into what? I asked. The house? The bed? My head. She flinched. I leaned against the counter, letting the silence stretch too long. Then I said, do you even understand what you did? She looked genuinely confused. I left. I hurt you. I know that. But people make mistakes. I was in a dark place. I snapped. Not loud, but sharp enough to crack the surface. No, you weren't in a dark place. You were in a hotel room with someone else's hands on your skin while I was still planning your birthday dinner. Her lips trembled. Not with tears. With anger. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, I interrupted. And don't insult me by pretending otherwise. She stood up then, like she couldn't bear to sit still anymore. I just thought maybe, if you still loved me. I do, I said. Her mouth fell open, but I wasn't finished. But love isn't a revolving door. It doesn't survive being abandoned like an old jacket you only miss when it rains. She was quiet for a long time. Then finally, she asked, what's she to you? June. I asked. She's kind. She's patient. She's real. She didn't come to fill a void. She didn't ask for anything. She just saw me, the broken me, and didn't look away. Darlene's mouth curled slightly. You hardly know her. Maybe, I said. But she showed me something you never did. That being chosen doesn't have to be painful. She wiped her eyes. Still no tears. Maybe they dried up weeks ago. I guess I don't belong here anymore. No, I said. You belong to the story you wrote when you left. This is a new chapter, and I'm still writing it. She turned to leave, but right before she walked out, she looked over her shoulder and asked one last thing. A quiet, trembling question I didn't expect. Would you still have me if she weren't here? And that hurt more than anything she'd done. That question didn't come from love. It came from ego. Would you still have me if she weren't here? As if June were just an obstacle, a placeholder, a speed bump in the road back to something she didn't know she had already buried. I didn't answer her right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid of how easily I did. She stood there, hand on the doorknob, eyes cast low like a child testing boundaries they never respected to begin with. I could feel her waiting, silently begging me to give her a lie. She wanted comfort, not consequences. And that's what made everything worse. Not the betrayal, not even the abandonment, but the way she returned not as someone broken, but someone entitled to be forgiven. If she weren't here, I said finally, I'd still be where you left me, wondering what I did wrong. Still apologizing to shadows for being boring. Still believing that love is something you only get when you suffer for it. She turned slowly, confusion knitting into her brow. So no. I gave a small, bitter smile. No, not even then. Her eyes scanned the room one last time. as if looking for proof that the world really did move on without her. I watched her take it all in. The rearranged furniture, the new blanket on the arm of the couch, the framed photo on the shelf, me and June, grinning with wind-whipped hair on the pier, both of us holding coffee cups too big for our hands. There were no romantic poses, no declarations, just two people caught mid-laughter, looking at each other like the world was soft for once. That photo did more damage than any cruel word I could have spoken. She turned back toward the door, and this time, she didn't ask for permission to leave. But she didn't walk out either. She opened her bag and pulled out a folder. Thick, sealed, no label. Just quietly placed it on the edge of the counter like some cursed object she no longer wanted to carry. "What's that?" I asked. "Everything," she said, barely audible. "Things I never sent. Letters, notes, copies of therapy sessions, and something else." I didn't reach for it. I didn't even glance down. She stood for a moment longer. Then, almost to herself, whispered, "I wish I had been stronger back then." I almost pitied her, but I couldn't afford to. Pity had a cost I'd already paid in full. She left without another word. I watched the door close again, a quieter exit than the first, but somehow heavier. I stood there for a long time, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the floorboards settling after her steps had gone. Eventually, I walked over to the folder. I didn't open it. I tucked it under the couch cushion like some relic from another lifetime I wasn't ready to examine yet. Later that morning, June emerged from the office. Her hair was messy, eyes sleepy, but calm. She didn't ask questions, just poured coffee into my mug like nothing had happened. Like we were just two people trying to find a rhythm in the quiet aftermath. "You okay?" she asked, without pressure. I nodded, but I wasn't. Not fully. "She asked me if I'd still want her if you weren't here," I said. June's eyebrows rose slightly. "What did you say?" I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, the kindness in her face, the patience in her silence, the way she didn't look through me like I was just a pit stop on the way to someone better. "I told her the truth," I said. She smiled, not triumphantly, just softly. "Good." We didn't talk much after that, but she sat with me while I finally opened the folder. Inside, there were confessions, pages and pages of them, affairs I hadn't known about. Not one man, but two. One of them had been at our wedding. The other had visited our house while I was working weekends. There were receipts, photos. One letter even had a line that stopped my breath cold. I didn't think he'd ever grow a spine. I assumed I could come back whenever I wanted. I laughed when I read that. A quiet, broken laugh. Then I set the papers down and poured myself another cup of coffee. Because suddenly, I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't sleep for the next 2 nights. Not out of heartbreak. That stage was over. What kept me up was the sheer weight of how much I didn't know. That folder she left behind sat on the dining room table like a crime scene dossier, daring me to read more, to understand the full scope of what my life had actually been. I kept expecting it to somehow get lighter, maybe some note of remorse that felt less rehearsed. But every page I turned was heavier than the last. It wasn't the affairs themselves that gutted me. It was how she talked about me in between them. "He's a safe option. He'd never leave me, even if I kicked him first. He's like a spare key. You forget it's there until you get locked out." Those weren't just words. Those were verdicts. That's how she saw me, a backup plan in human form. Not a man, not a partner, just the guy who stayed behind so she could explore whatever she wanted without consequence. June watched me read those pages over time, never asking questions, never pressuring me to talk. She just brought me tea instead of coffee when my hands started shaking too much to hold the mug steady. She was the quiet against the noise, and I hated how often I found myself scanning her face for signs that maybe, just maybe, she'd wake up one day and do the same. Because once someone betrays you like that, you start preparing for everyone else to follow. You don't even mean to. You just begin measuring every kindness against the possibility of future cruelty. It was during one of those restless nights, around 2 a.m., when I heard the front door handle jiggle. Not forcefully, just a gentle test of the lock. My heart shot into my throat. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again. When I reached the door and yanked it open, she was standing there. Darlene. Wet from the rain, mascara streaking like she'd just stepped out of a black and white horror film. No suitcase. No folder. Just her, holding a single photo frame. "I thought maybe I could trade this for a conversation," she said, her voice trembling. I looked down. It was the peer photo, the one of me in June, mid-laughter, that she had clearly stolen from the shelf last week while I wasn't looking. You stole that? I asked, more confused than angry. She nodded. I couldn't stop staring at it. I kept wondering what it was like to be that version of you. I don't even know who that man is anymore. I don't either, I said, and I meant it. She stepped closer. I didn't back away this time. There was no threat in her eyes. Just ruin. I went to see him, she admitted. The one I left for. He's moved on. Has a new girlfriend. Told me I was a necessary mistake. Can you believe that? I didn't respond. I'm not asking to move back in, she said quickly. I know that door's shut. I need to know if I meant anything. Ever. If all those years were real. God, that question. It wasn't fair. She wanted closure, validation, peace, but she wanted it from the very person she had shattered. You did mean something, I said. But so did the man you replaced me with. And the one before him. And all the people you shared our bed with in your mind before you ever walked out. They all meant something too, apparently. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but I kept going. You didn't destroy our marriage in one night, Darlene. You chipped away at it piece by piece. You removed bricks from the foundation every time you lied, smiled at me while texting someone else, rolled your eyes when I asked you how your day was. She looked like she wanted to collapse right there on the porch. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. In June, she asked, barely getting the name out. Do you really think she's different? I paused. She doesn't make me feel replaceable. A few more seconds passed. Then she handed me the frame, turned around, and walked back into the night. No umbrella. No goodbye. Just the sound of her heels sinking into the soaked earth as she disappeared from view. I brought the frame back inside. Set it on the shelf again. June was standing in the hallway, holding a blanket. You okay? She asked. I nodded. Yeah, I think. I'm almost okay. But then I saw it, just a flash, something white tucked into the back of the photo frame. It was a note. Handwritten. 2 lines. And it changed everything. The note was tucked behind the backing of the photo frame, folded twice, barely visible unless you held it just right under the kitchen light. I pulled it out slowly, my fingers suddenly cold, my breath shallow like I had found something radioactive. I didn't know what I expected, a final apology? A plea? Some manipulative attempt at closure? What I read instead didn't feel like any of those things. It felt unfinished. It was handwritten in her curling, overly rounded letters I hadn't seen in years. Just 2 lines. If anything happens to me, ask June about the accident. She knows more than she told you. I stared at it for a long time, my eyes refusing to believe what I just read. The accident? I muttered under my breath, over and over, like the phrase might suddenly connect to something in my memory. But nothing came. I hadn't heard her mention any accident. Not recently, not when we were together, not in any of the therapy pages she'd left behind. I looked up. June was standing quietly by the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice low but steady. I held up the note. Did you know she put this in the frame? She stepped closer, took the paper carefully, read it twice. Her face didn't shift, not even a blink. And then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Just once, a bitter little exhale. Well, she said, sooner or later, I figured this would come up. What does it mean, June? I asked, but there was a sharpness in my voice that surprised even me. She sighed, sat down at the kitchen table, and stared at her folded hands. It was before you, and I really knew each other. Last spring. We ran into each other, me and Darlene, at one of those neighborhood charity auctions. She was already drinking too much, obviously trying to impress some banker guy who didn't even remember her name. I wasn't going to say anything, but she followed me out to the parking lot after it ended. Slurring. Emotional. She started saying things I didn't want to hear. I sat down across from her, tension crackling between us. She said she'd made a huge mistake, June continued. That she had left someone solid for someone exciting, and now she was stuck between regret and pride. She was crying, holding her keys. Then, she got into her car. I begged her not to drive. I physically tried to stop her. She shoved me, hit the gas, and reversed right into a delivery van. I blinked. I never heard about this. Of course you didn't. She asked me not to say anything. Paid off the driver. Said if it got out, her boss would demote her. Or worse. She begged me to keep quiet. Said you didn't need another reason to think she was unraveling. And honestly, I didn't want to be part of your marital mess. I was still hurting too. My heart was pounding now. Not because of the accident. That part wasn't the shock. It was the timing. Spring. Months before she left. Before the lasagna. Before the overnight bag. She was already unraveling, I said quietly. Already losing herself. June nodded. She wasn't just cheating, Ren. She was self-destructing and dragging people down with her. I didn't want to get pulled in, but I also didn't want you to think I was hiding something later. So I left it alone. I sat back, brain swirling. The version of Darlene I had built, calculated, cold, cruel, didn't quite match this panicked, spiraling wreck June had just described. It didn't make anything she did okay, but it complicated it. Why would she bring it up now? I asked. Why hide that message behind a photo of me and you? June looked down. Because that's what guilt looks like, Ren. It doesn't arrive wrapped in confession. It leaks through cracks in strange ways. She wanted to be remembered as someone in pain, not someone who inflicted it. That hit me hard. All this time, I thought she came back for selfish reasons, and maybe she did, but she also came back to plant one last seed. A buried truth. Something small, folded, hidden in the only thing she thought I'd keep. And now it was inside me, growing like a splinter. I couldn't sleep that night either. I just kept replaying everything June had said, everything Darlene had written. I opened that folder of confessions again, looking for signs, clues I might have missed. But now they felt different. Not just guilty. Haunted. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps again. Not at the front door. Upstairs. June wasn't in bed. The sound of her footsteps upstairs wasn't frantic. They were slow, almost hesitant, like someone walking in a space they weren't sure they belonged in. I stood at the bottom of the staircase, every nerve on edge. After the message in the photo frame, after June's story about the crash, I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. I only knew I couldn't carry any more hidden weight. I climbed the stairs one step at a time and found her in the spare room, the room that used to be a dumping ground for old boxes and holiday lights. She had turned on the small lamp in the corner and was sitting on the edge of the bed, legs tucked under her, staring at the note. She looked up when I entered. Her eyes were soft, not panicked, not guilty, just tired, but with a hint of something else I hadn't seen in her before. Clarity, maybe. Or peace. You found it, she said. I nodded. Why didn't you just tell me directly? She shook her head. Because I didn't deserve that kind of grace. Not after everything I did. I thought if I told you out loud, it would sound like another excuse. And I didn't want to be heard. I just wanted to be understood, quietly. I sat down in the chair across from her. That's not how understanding works, Darlene. You don't bury it behind photos and hope someone forgives you when they find it. I know, she whispered. But I was trying. In my own broken way. I sighed and looked out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving behind streaks across the glass. Streetlights glowed softly through the mist, casting long shadows on the floor. I'm not angry anymore, I said. But I'm not yours anymore either. She smiled, bittersweet. I figured. We sat in silence. Not awkward, just final. The kind of silence that comes after a long, terrible storm has passed and all that's left is the sound of dripping eaves and the soft breath of survival. I'm leaving in the morning, she said. You won't see me again. You don't have to vanish, I told her. But if it helps you start over, then okay. She stood up slowly, stepped toward me, and for the first time in what felt like a century, gently reached out her hand. I took it. Not out of love. Not out of obligation. But because closure isn't a door slamming shut, sometimes it's just holding someone's hand one last time and letting go for good. That night, I went back downstairs and found June sitting on the couch, curled in my hoodie, reading a book she never finished. She looked up at me, waiting for a signal. I sat down next to her and took her hand without a word. She's leaving in the morning, I said. June nodded. Good. She said she won't come back. She already left long ago, June replied softly. You just needed to see it for yourself. I leaned back, finally allowing my body to exhale everything it had carried for so long. The next morning, I heard the front door open, then close. No suitcase this time. Just the faint sound of footsteps walking away for the last time. I didn't look out the window. I didn't need to. I was free. 2 months later, June moved in, slowly, on her own terms. No rush. No drama. Just her toothbrush beside mine, her book on the nightstand, her laughter in the hallway. Sometimes, when we sit on the porch watching the sky turn gold, she'll reach over and squeeze my hand. Not to claim me. Just to remind me I'm here, now, and I am no longer waiting to be chosen. Because this time, I already was.